Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of MTG Sin Senpai. So for today, I have kind of an interesting one. I have a few different things here to show off. So I have three different draft decks I want to kind of review and break down real quick. This particular one I built, and I forgot where the sideboard is. Unfortunately, it's not there. This one was a fun one that I did enjoy, but unfortunately I didn't place to. I only placed like third place, something like that. This one I placed first, and this particular one I got last place. But this was only a draft amongst four people, so it wasn't the craziest pulls. And then I have one prize pack from my first place winnings. Draft. There's only a single draft booster because the store had run out of product, and I decided not to take any other booster packs. I decided to save it for store credit. And then these are a couple of those weird collector booster sampler packs. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen these, but they're the ones that come in the Commander Precons now. So instead of getting like regular booster packs, you get like a sampler collector boosters pack. So it's like one of those weird, has a chance of getting good cards, but it's very unlikely. It's probably just going to be foil commons and uncommons. But yeah, personally, I haven't opened any of these myself, but my first ones I'll be opening will be on the channel. So let's break it down. Let's go into my worst deck. So breaking this down, these are the cards that I picked in the end. This particular deck, I'm not going to go super heavy into the breakdown because this was a four-man pod. So there's a lot of repeats, and then I myself did not draft too great. Unfortunately, I went last place. I will admit I did get kind of sucked into the rares and mythics that I pulled in this particular pull. All three of the rares and mythics that I opened are ones that I picked, and then those are the ones that I decided to run, and they were actually all on color. So Vat of Rebirth, I know there's a lot of people that don't like this particular card. I actually enjoy this a lot, especially with one of the cards that I pulled that you'll be seeing shortly. The fact that you can bring it back and come straight to the battlefield, it's amazing. It doesn't say anything about being tapped. The only drawback, it has to be at sorcery speed, but the fact that you can 3 mana return pretty much any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield is pretty decent. 1 mana, 1/2 flying. I mean, the power creep, I think I've discussed it before. It's pretty insane. It's a 1 mana, 1/2 flying vigilance. It's just dumb. Got ourselves removal, just solid removal in regard, period. Either being sacrificing a small creature or a small artifact or something that's not important, or just paying straight up 5 mana, destroying target creature or planeswalker. Whisper of the Dross is a pretty decent 1 mana, technically removal spell depending on how you use it, or combat trick, or just something to proliferate for 1 mana, so it's pretty good. We got ourselves a Sinew Dancer, a decent tap card that potentially locks down your opponent's biggest creatures. Yeah, you have to be corrupt. Your opponent has to be corrupted for it to get the max value, but it's still a decent 1 mana 1/1. Offer of Immortality is one of my favorite types of battle tricks. Technically, I classify this as removal because on the off chance that your opponent swings in thinking that they have the most advantage, you can use this, pump up or give one of your, little 1/1s or something that's important that normally would die in the trade, but whenever you block, gives it that death touch and indestructibility until end of turn at instant speed. It's pretty fun. This stupid 1 mana, or not 1 mana, 2 mana 1/3 flyer that has max value if you're corrupted. If not, it's just still a 2 mana 1/3 flyer for 2 mana, and then there's 2 of them, so that's pretty good. And then if you're able to get your opponent corrupted, they're flying 2/4s essentially. Bladed Ambassador is not bad. So it's a 2 mana 3/1 that I'm not the biggest fan of 2 mana 3/1s normally, but the fact that that does have the ability to be indestructible, it's actually pretty relevant. It's pretty strong in that sense. 2 mana 2/2. If you saw in the pulls, I ran this one. I ran one just because I needed to fill out creatures, and on the off chance that I did corrupt my opponents, I'd be able to bring it back. Blight Belly Rat, just a decent mana, 2 mana bear that has Toxic 1, and that when it dies it proliferates, so not too bad. Planar Disruption is just solid white removal. Essentially, it's pacifism. Now, of course, one of my opponents that beat me, excuse me, played every one of the white cards that allowed them to bounce their creatures. So yeah, that's unfortunate that that was the case. But having three Planar Disruptions is pretty decent. Mind you, this is something that typically doesn't happen too often when you draft, but because we did a 4-man pool, it was a little bit easier to get away with something like that. Infected Flesh Cutter is actually a pretty decent equipment. I like it myself, and putting this on a flying creature, especially that a flying creature that has a big butt, perfect example of those gliders, making the might every turn, it gives you something to sack. It pumps up for the Vat of Rebirth. Just a decent card for sack synergies, especially in limited. Goldwind's Helm. This is just a decent the 4 mirrored in cards are actually pretty decent. The fact that it is an equipment that you can use after the fact. 3 mana 3/2 that whenever it dies makes a dude, and it has Toxic 1, so not too bad value wise. It's something just to fill out and round out the deck. Shieldred's Head Cleaver, it's actually a pretty decent card. At normally looking at it, if it was just a 4 mana 2/4 with just Menace, probably would not be the best card to run. But because it has that Toxic 2, it does cause opponents to be like, hey, is it actually worth it to block this? Because Toxic 2 is a big deal. Got ourselves Ravenous Necro Titan, so it's a 4 mana 6/6, which I'm sure you noticed I don't have too much toxic in the deck itself. So normally I'd be just sacking one of my creatures, but usually it would be one of the mites created from the Flesh Cutter, so it's pretty decent. Then we got one of our first rares, the Archfiend of the Dross. This is just a ridiculous card. Just a 4 mana 6/6 that essentially just puts your opponent on a certain many turn clock. If they have no answers for it, they just lose. On the offhand, though, if it does get to that 0 oil counters, you do die. So there's a severe drawback in that nature. But at the same time, if it just dies, be it, let's say I sack it from my 1 mana removal spell, or I do something else to get rid of it myself, that's definitely an option. Vat Emergence is actually a pretty decent, just a reanimator card that brings back any big creature from the graveyard and proliferate. Perfect example, let's say this was at 1 for the turn, and after I swung in, my opponent still lives. I do this, grab maybe the biggest creature from my graveyard or their graveyard, and cause this to proliferate and be at 2 again. So yeah, pretty deal. And then the fact that it has the Massacre Worm claws at the bottom. Whenever a creature and opponent dies, its controller loses 2 life. That's just insane for the opponents only. Then we got ourselves Mirrodin Bardich? I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but it's a pretty decent 5 mana 2/1 that gives your creatures vigilance after it's equipped. Mythic number 1 is Drivnod, Carnage Dominus. So this is just an insane 5 mana 8/3 that you could potentially make indestructible and causes your death triggers to happen twice. Death triggers being one of the best ones I have in this particular draft deck was the Vat of Rebirth. Allowed me to essentially activate this even sooner because of the death triggers. And then there was a few other things. And then, of course, the big money card, Elesh Norn. I'm sure we all know what this is. Everyone knows it's a good card. It's just a good card to run. It actually shut down a lot of my opponent's removal because they were running white and they had the ossifications that entered the battlefield and exiled the creature. With Elesh Norn on the board, those no longer are valid. Unfortunately, I didn't grab any of the ossifications, otherwise that would have made my deck even, more ridiculous. But I did at least get some pretty amazing rares in this particular pool, so I'm pretty happy about it. Even though I got last place, I technically win in just card value, so Elesh Norn definitely is a winner there. This is another draft deck that I built. I think originally I was going to go Abzan with my picks, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So this particular one, I was going to go Abzan, and I think I got like 4th place, and that's where this 1 pack came from, I believe, for this particular pool. But going into these picks, it's a 4 mana 2/3 that if you're doing the toxic route, this is actually pretty decent. It makes your toxic creatures even bigger, or even if you don't have toxic creatures, it just makes one of your creatures a little bit bigger, and that extra +1/+1 does make battle math a little bit more difficult. So it's actually a pretty decent 4 mana 2/3. Got ourselves a couple Incisor Gliders. I really like this stupid card. As much as I hate going against it, I like playing it as well. As you can tell, I have 2 of them in this particular pool. It's a pretty fun one. This particular uncommons is ridiculous with toxic creatures. Just the fact that it gives your toxic creatures an additional +1/+1 whenever they attack. That battle math is insane. And it's a 2 mana 2/2 with toxic 2. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's pretty strong, and especially if you have a good, strong, toxic theme going. It just helps out. Noin's Wellspring. I personally enjoy this card a lot. It's performed well for me. Whenever you have card selection and card draw both in a single card, it's pretty decent, especially in limited, because one of the things is you need to have constant resources, and the best way to do that is have cards that allow you to repeatably do so. This is just a little bit slow, but at the same time, it's definitely something that can happen often. And look, I got two of them. Unfortunately, I didn't actually run it in the deck itself because I had to cut them, but it is what it is. Uh, Carnivorous Canopy. So this is something I decided not to mainboard because the rest of my deck had more than enough removal. But in this particular limited meta, you could potentially mainboard this just because there's so many relevant artifacts, enchantments, or creatures with flying that you're able to destroy. And the fact that if you destroy something with mana value 3 or less, you can proliferate as well. It's a pretty decent sorcery spell. 1 mana, 0/1 trample goblin that gets +1/+0 for each oil counter. This one I think it was just a simple, it was just a good goblin card, and I had nothing else to pick in the pack, so I decided to grab that. Plated Onslaught when I was originally on the white plan. This is just an insane combat trick, especially if you have a bunch of artifact creatures or mites, because mites are artifact creatures. More often than not, I've always seen this as a 2 mana +2/+1 for the team, which is insane. Distorted Curiosity, I think I hate drafted this particular card just because it's potentially a divination for 1 mana if you're corrupted or your opponent's corrupted. So yeah, I decided to grab that up. Zealot's Conviction is a nice, fun battle trick card, especially if you're doing the toxic route. The fact that it gives flash 1 mana gives your enchanted creature +1/+1, and if your opponent's corrupted, it gets an additional +1/+0 and first strike for the enchanted creature. It's pretty insane. Volshock Splitter, I believe I just grabbed because I had no other options, but it's a decent for Mirrodin card. This particular guy, if you're doing the Mirrodin equipment route, it's actually pretty insane. So it's pretty strong if you're going that particular route. Otherwise, I don't recommend it. I just grabbed it just because I think I was filling out. This one was definitely a last pick. Most people are going to overlook on this card. Unless you're heavily proliferating or very long games and you have no options to win, then yeah, you probably are not going to be running that particular one. Against All Odds is actually a pretty decent white sorcery spell that either allows you to reanimate something or blink something on your side, or do both, which is actually pretty insane. So that's a pretty fun card that I would recommend going if you're doing the white. This one's actually a pretty decent card as well, especially whenever you're doing the artifact creature thing that the sub-theme that the blue has. Pretty good. This particular card as well, it was another okay card just because if you're doing the artifact sub-theme, you're able to loot, which is not too bad, and allows you to put cards back on the bottom of the deck. And this, the Foily Mountain, because, you know, Foily Mountains are pretty. So that's the sideboard. Main deck again. This one, pretty obvious. Whisper of the Dross, decent 1 mana removal that proliferates. Mass Skull Bomb. So a lot of the Skull Bombs are actually pretty good. Initially, I slept on them, but then actually running them in limited, they are pretty amazing. Either using them as just a card draw or using them for the ability to just eke in that extra damage and card draw as well. It's pretty solid. Vat of Rebirth, I don't need to explain that one again. It's just a solid card that I like. I like Reanimator cards, and this is definitely one of the strong ones. Offer of Immortality, once again, pretty decent card that just great battle trick. Bite Belly Rat. It's pretty obvious I have a sub-theme of my own. I do enjoy similar cards, and I'll play them again and again, typically in limited. And Drown in Ichor is actually a pretty decent removal spell. The fact that it's 2 mana, -4/-4, and proliferate. It's pretty ridiculous, so that's why I got that. Anoint with the Affliction is another amazing removal spell, especially if you're going the corrupted route. Normally, even early on, you'll be able to exile things of mana value 3 or less. And then late game, especially if you know your opponent has something kind of bomb heavy, and you know you can get that corrupted pretty easily. It's just 2 mana remove anything or exile anything. 3 mana 3/2 toxic that makes a dude, not self-explanatory. This one I kind of needed. I ran just to fill out bodies because I was running really low on the creature count. I personally would not normally pick this unless I just had to do it. And mind you, I originally was going to go there it is, green, black, and white. But I decided to go green, white, green, black to be more consistent. Like I said, I ran mainboard one of these, not two, because more often than not, you would be able to use one to, in some situation, most situations. And then if I had no options or no targets, I'd be able to side that out. For Exian Atlas, I ran just because I like mana fixtures and mana ramp. This is both of them. And the fact that if your opponent's corrupted, it is that extra damage, which incidental life loss is definitely important. A decent, solid 3 mana 1/3 with Death Touch with Toxic 1. Just the fact that it's Toxic 1 puts it above other similar cards that are similar. And the fact that it's a 1/3 Death Touch does cause your opponents to typically be holding off on either blocks or attacks. Contagious Vorak, this one's just a nice mana ramp, mana fixer, and on the off chance that you miss, you still proliferate. And then going the toxic route or having different oil counters and things of that nature, it goes in either or, and it just is an all around decent 3 mana 3/3, which I have 2 of, which pretty fun. This card I really like, actually. Normally I'm not a big fan of the black draw cards that make you lose life, but this particular one also gives each opponent a poison counter on top of that. So if you're doing the toxic route or the corrupted route or either route, just the fact that that extra poison counter does matter. One of the so this one I got super lucky. Sword of Forge and Frontier, just a great card to run, period. I actually had 2 opponents that were just green-red, and they had no way to block me, so I was able to just keep hitting them with this. It was pretty funny, pretty interesting, pretty self-explanatory. It's just a strong card to run regardless, and it could go in any color deck, so there's that. Lattice Blade Mantis is actually a pretty decent 4 mana 4/3 that whenever it attacks you can make it a 5/4 that essentially has pseudo vigilance, so it's a decent creature to round off the 4 count. Another 4 mana 4/4, this is a toxic 3 creature that when you ETB can proliferate, so doing the toxic route had some of the more stronger toxic creatures in the higher end. This one's also a pretty decent one. The fact that it has reanimation, not straight to the battlefield, but at least you can bring something back to your hand, so there's that. Tyrannix Atrocity, I think this card is an amazing card in Limited. 5 mana 4/4 haste toxic 3. This only has to hit once to get your toxic online, and sometimes depending on the board state you're able to kind of sneak this in and just hit them real fast. And having 2 of them, it's pretty insane. So yeah, there's that. This card, especially if you're doing the aggro plan, you probably don't want to run this, but this is more of kind of a mid-rangey if you need. The fact that it gains you life is already a plus, and then it has the added bonus if you have anything with the oil counter on it, you also draw a card. Yeah, it's a 5 mana 3/4, so it's kind of lacking in that nature, but the fact that you can potentially draw a card and you're guaranteed the 3 life is why I ran that. Another reason I ran green, Thrun, Breaker of Silence. This card's ridiculous. Just the fact that it is a 5 mana 5/5 trample that can't be countered, that's indestructible on your turn, and essentially nothing can target it that's not green. And most green removal that would try and target it, they need a big enough creature to target it, and that doesn't happen typically. So it's just an insane green bomb. And another green bomb, Nissa, Ascended Animist. It was kind of obvious why I went the green black specifically. I mean, I could potentially have splashed the white, but just because of the sheer number of double green pips that I had, that's why I decided to just keep with 2 colors. And yeah, this kind of self-explanatory. It's just a stupid strong planeswalker that's able to do some goofy things. And so yeah, that was draft deck number 2. And then this was the one that went undefeated. This particular one is a ridiculous one that... it's a Simic deck, which I also splashed white and I splashed red. One card that's missing is Melgoz. Melgoz, is that how you pronounce it? It's the 3 mana, 1 colorless, red-green legendary creature that's 5/5, enters the battlefield with 5 oil counters, and then you can pay to remove oil counters and get effects. So I had that particular card in this deck as well. So only reason it's not in here is because at the end of the draft, one of my opponents requested to have it. I just decided to give it to them just because it's they needed it for some deck that they were wanting to build, and it's not even like a 50-cent rare from my understanding, if I remember correctly, which I'm more than happy to give out to people that if they're going to play with it, I mean, I'll give it to them, especially if it's something on the cheaper end. typically anything that's like $2 plus, or especially anything that's up on $10 plus, I typically will trade. But anything below that, I'm the type that I'll be happy to give out. Now, going into this particular one, Skull Bombs. Once again, they're self-explanatory. Every single one of the Skull Bombs are actually pretty strong. Even the red one that gives oil counters, there's so many relevant cards that need oil counters that it's actually pretty solid and pretty strong. This one allowing you to bounce a card as well and draw a card, or bounce a creature, is actually pretty insane. So there's that. Font of Progress. This particular one I ran in this particular deck just because there was an alternate win condition, which actually helped me win one of my games. I do have a handful of Proliferate in this particular deck as well, so that allowed me to get this up to, I believe, 4 oil counters. So I was able to mill 4 cards multiple times to essentially kill my opponent. So this did come in handy for this particular deck. Prophetic Prism, because I was going essentially 4 colors, having this as a mana fix was crucial. It definitely helped to make sure that I had my colors. There's a couple double green and double blue cards as well, so that definitely helped with the mana fixing. This particular card is an insane uncommon. The fact that you are able to charge it up with oil counters by just casting non-creature spells, which every limited deck typically has. And then the fact that you can give target creature flying until end of turn, and having multiple counters on this, giving multiple guys that you control flying until end of turn, it's actually it's pretty detrimental to your opponents that have no answer to flying. So evasion is a thing, and it definitely helps. Prologue to Phyresis is another one of those cards that when you cast it, you do an effect and give your opponent a poison counter. So it's pretty strong. And poison counter, it was like some weird Simic poison / proliferate sub-theme that I had going on with this particular deck, which was actually pretty strong. Serum Snare is an insane card that allows you to return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It doesn't have to be just your opponent's, it could be also one of yours. So you could potentially save something of yours as well. But the fact that it also has that, if it's targeting something with mana value 3 or less, it also proliferates. So it's pretty insane. It's a really strong temporary removal spell that I would recommend running if you can get the chance. 2 mana 1/1 Flying Vigilance that when it dies it draws a card. It's not the strongest card, but it's actually a pretty decent card that actually got in the way of one of my opponents because they ran a bunch of the 3/1 creatures. And so having this on my side of the board, I'm like, I'm more than happy to trade this for a 3/1 every time. And the fact that it's Flying Vigilance, I'm able to attack in, do my thing, and still have this on the defensive end. Talking about that power creep, this card is just, there's too many abilities for a common. But it is what it is, and that's why I ran it. Once again, the Slaughter Singer, sorry. This card is just insane. I had enough toxic creatures. When I say enough, there's actually only like 4 or 5, but the fact that I had them with this, whenever they were on together, I was swinging with 5/5s. Pretty insane. Contagious Vorak, once again, mana fixing, and if I'm needing to, I can proliferate with it as well, which I was able to actually proliferate an opponent to their death because of that ability. Tainted Observer is a decent 3 mana 2/3 that allows you to proliferate and to flying 2/3 for 3. So it's actually a pretty decent card. The fact that, like I said before, this had that proliferate sub theme, so this was there, and that actually did come into handy. Once again, the 3 mana 1/3 Toxic Death Touch, just a ridiculous. It's just a good solid common pick. This one's one of those nice removal spells, or technically not full on removal, but at least inhibits one of your opponent's creatures. And not only that, it doesn't matter the mana value, you do get a proliferate and tap down that creature with this as well. So it's actually a pretty good card. This one was for the mana ramp and the fix because I was doing the 4 color thing. So this definitely helped me to be able to cast my alternate extra cards. This particular Phyrexian, funny enough, cat is actually a really strong 3 mana 3/2 with flash. Either you can do it offensively, where at the end of your opponent's turn you flash this in, tap down one of their blockers and you can go in, or you could do it defensively during your opponent's turn whenever they're attacking, but prior to attacks you can flash this in and tap down one of their creatures. So it's actually a pretty decent 3 mana artifact battle trick. I have 2 of these, which was pretty insane, so I decided I needed to run both because that's my removal. Viral Spawning is a pretty decent 3 mana 3/3. So it's a sorcery that makes a creature. I consider this more my creature slot myself personally, just because that's what it's what I'm doing when I cast it. And then if you happen to get the one card in the set that has flashback, but fun fact. And then if you happen to get that corrupted, it's another 3 mana 3/3. So you're getting 2 cards for the value of 1 card in your deck. So it's a pretty strong card, I personally say. Blade of Shared Souls is actually a fun card that I think a lot of people overlook the power of this particular card. The fact that you're able to turn, let's say if you have mites or if you have piddly little 1/1s, or perfect example, that flying 1/1, if you equip this to that, you turn it into one of your bigger creatures. So it's actually pretty strong and actually helped me win a few of my games. Conduit of Worlds is ridiculous. I don't know why people would pass this. It's a really strong card, I personally feel, and the fact that, yes, the first clause allowing you to play lands from your graveyard is okay, but the fact that you're able to, let's say game gets to the late game, you guys are grinding it out, you're able to replay your bombs if your opponent happens to have an answer. Yes, you may not be able to cast any other spells, but if you have nothing else in hand, might as well just recast your best spell from your graveyard again, or your permanent spells specifically. But even then, just the fact that you're able to recast things from the graveyard is pretty strong with that. Speaking of recasting things, if this ever died, it's one of the reasons I did the proliferate sub-theme, and this actually helped me to, my opponent had 6 poison counters, and they would have killed me the next turn, but because I had 2 instances of proliferate that turned into 4 instances of proliferate, I was able to put their 6 poison up to 10 and win on that turn, which was pretty ridiculous. And yeah, it's a 4 mana 3/5 already. That's pretty good. The doubling proliferate is incidental, and yeah, I know I never actually got this to be indestructible, but I had the opportunity to do so because I had the font on the battlefield with the 4 counters on it. So I could have done it, but I chose not to. Atrocity, once again, is an amazing card, and earlier I had 2 of them in that previous deck. In this particular one, I have 3. So yeah, this was just what my deck was aiming to get to, and essentially either beat my opponent out with these or proliferate them, or it was just it's such a crazy mid-rangey Simic deck. Once again, this guy is just value. The Hunter Maze, it's a decent card, especially comboing with the Conduit of Worlds. Especially if you have no other lands, just replay this from the graveyard every turn. Ridiculous synergy there. And then this was the Carpeline Gorge that I ran. I happened to get this passed to me with the Milgauss as well. And so I was already in green and I was splashing for that red, so I had those in there. So this one was the undefeated deck, so that's a fun one. I know that was a lot of the video is a little long because I'm going into 3. That's why I normally only do 2 draft decks, but I'll keep that in mind going forward. I'll only do 2 now. And then let's kind of break into these packs, seeing if we get anything good on top of this as well. Mite token in front, and oh, look at that! That's a double rare pack with the Black Sun's Zenith, or Black Sun's Twilight foil, which is that's neat. And then Safe House, and this is a weird one. I don't know where it would be being played, but hey, we got that. And then our uncommons, nothing too crazy, nothing too insane. There we go. That's our commons, uncommons. Then I guess we'll break into the promo pack now, and then see if we get anything good. And then for whoever gets the code, best of luck to you. The code is there. It is. I hope you get some good cards in your in that arena pool. And one of the worst cards to pull. I don't know if that's worth anything, but I personally have no plans to use this at all. But hey, I have it now. There's that. We got our spells and experimental augury, which is pretty neat. Oh, that's the Ozolith. That's a pretty damn good hit. I'm not sure if I can say that particular word, but I said it because that is a really good one. That's awesome. And then let's do these sampler packs. I have no idea what you can get in these. I'm assuming you can get some good collector pack stuff in them, but I personally have not opened any myself yet. So we'll see if we get anything good. And if I could just open it, because there's so few cards in the pack, I don't want to just bust it open because I might accidentally rip the contents. And so extra careful. There we go. All right, we got ourselves Once again, useless cardboard that does nothing. This could be an actual token and be useful. We got ourselves a Howling Mine and a foil self-assembler. So at least we got a Howling Mine, so I guess there's chances of rares in here. And then the self-assembler and foil, it's neat looking, but I don't think I'll be doing anything with that personally myself. And then we have ourselves the Phyrexian one, because oh wow, this one opened a lot easier. I got the Urza deck, and I got the Toxic deck from the set. So once again, useless cardboard, no point in this at all. And then we got ourselves a Lux Artillery, which is pretty cool. I believe that's a commander card only. And we got ourselves a foil Quicksilver Fisher. So, I mean, it's cool that they have these in there and they have the chances of getting other things. But I prefer the regular packs or maybe even a set booster pack. I mean, I remember commander decks, or no, what was it? The Precons or the Planeswalker decks? I forget what they were. But for a while, they had like 2 regular packs that came in them. Who knows? But yeah, I know this one was a long one, so thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to watch the video. Please look forward to more content coming soon. I do have fun things that I'm going to share. Since this one was a little bit longer, I'm not going to find the cards that I was looking to show off, but I'll try and get those pulled up for you guys. But thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to watch the video. And if you made it all the way to the end, do me that small favor, please, to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It is appreciated. And never forget, you guys, Senpai didn't notice. Good night.